First fired, first hired. 4 days after being let go by the Eagles, Andy Reid is now the new head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. Reid will report directly to Chiefs chairman Clark Hunt. Reid canceled scheduled interviews with the Cardinals and Chargers once it became apparent he would not have the same kind of control he now has in Kansas City. Reid spent 14 seasons in Philadelphia, taking the team to 5 NFC Championship games and 1 Super Bowl. Before the Chiefs could settle on Reid, there was one more piece of business they needed to tend to, parting ways with 4-year general manager Scott Pioli. The Chiefs were 23-41 under Pioli, including tied for an NFL worst 2-14 in 2012. Pioli's exit opens the door for Reid to bring in his own general manager, most likely Packers director of football operations John Dorsey, or former Browns and Eagles general manager Todd Pecker. Randy Moss is in Kansas City, where there's been an Andy Reid sighting. Randy, what's the latest you can tell us on Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs?
The Eagle has landed, or in this case, the former Eagle has landed. It was a couple of hours ago, Fran, that the Chiefs plane transported Andy Reid to the Kansas City airport. The black SUV with TV choppers flying overhead, very reminiscent of Brett Favre in Minnesota a few years ago, drove Reid to the complex here at Arrowhead Stadium. Hunt and Reid got out at the stadium for a while and went inside. Now, Reid has seen Arrowhead before. He's played there. But they had the message boards going and everything. It didn't say, "Welcome, Andy Reid." That would have been a bit cheesy. But it was a pretty nice touch. Then they made the short drive over here to the facility behind me, where they remain right now. Now, no deal has officially been announced right now by the Chiefs. I have been told by the Chiefs that even if that is to happen today, there will be no introductory press conference with Andy Reid today, which means that probably won't happen until Monday at the earliest because of the playoff games on Saturday and
we're
Sunday.
bringing a
so it may
GM
be
first.
a few days yet, Fran, before we get to see Andy Reid wearing red.
I mentioned the control that Andy Reid will have in Kansas City, much like what he had in Philadelphia. What more can you tell us about the possible colleagues he might bring in to help fill out his staff?
Well, you mentioned the two key names in Heckert and Dorsey. Gil Brandt of NFL.com, I think, was the first one to report that Reid has been promised full organizational and personnel control, which of course would extend to the hiring. Now the question is, what GM would be willing to come in and work under those parameters with Reid having all the control? And Heckert worked with Reid under a very similar arrangement in Philadelphia in the early to mid-2000s when they built those formidable Eagles teams. So Reid has worked with Heckert before, and he's also worked very closely with Dorsey because both Reid and Dorsey were on the Green Bay Packers staff once upon a time under Mike Holmgren. Our Ian Rappaport is also reporting that it's not just Heckert or Dorsey, that Andy Reid actually wants to bring in Heckert and Dorsey, both of them. So we'll get to see exactly whether he'll be able to make that come to fruition as well, Brent.
Yeah, and there's also talk that he's already reached out to Juan Castillo to come in and be his offensive line coach. So lots of movement taking place in Kansas City. Randy Moss, the very latest for us in Kansas City on Andy Reid's hiring. And let's welcome in Charlie Castro to the front office view. And Charlie, you were very adamant, and when there was speculation that Andy Reid was going to lose his job towards the end of the season, you said he'd be the first coach who you would hire. The Chiefs listened to you, and they went out and they've hired Andy Reid now. How quickly could he turn things around in Kansas City?
Well, it's good to know our ratings are higher in Kansas City, Fran. That's good to know there. Hey, I think it's a question of the three things got to happen here. Number one, he's got to get a quarterback. He's got to get that solved. Andy Reid has made a living off developing a quarterback in Donovan McNabb, taking a raw product there, making him a good football player. So he'll probably have to find a middle-round draft choice to start with there, maybe get Alex Smith. So that's the first part. Then he's got to address free agency. Dwayne Bowe, Glenn Dorsey, Brandon Albert are all free agents. Can't afford to lose all of them now. So if he loses them all, then he's set back another step there. If he keeps them all, he forges ahead here, and the quarterback is the next biggest thing he's got to handle. Finally, what's he do on defense? Does he stay with the 34, or does he go to a 4-3? That'll be a decision. It probably isn't a big change with the personnel they have. They're not far away from being a 43 defensive team. So that really is not a big deal, in my opinion. But if he can get the quarterback solved this year, then perhaps next year they're in playoff contention, certainly the year after.
And we mentioned he was talking to Juan Castillo, also talking to Pat Shermer, Brad Childress, trying to fill out that staff as quickly as he can. Charlie's going to be back later in this hour with his coaching awards so far for the 2012 season. Can't wait for those. And now that Oregon head coach